Umaharap tayo sa umagang may mga balita ng masamang panahon. At ang leksyon ng ating mga talakayan ay patungo sa magtala at magpatuloy, magtala at magpatuloy. Mga larawan at sariling binabalikan o iniiwanan. Ito ang ilan sa maaaring mapag-usapan sa dalawa nating workshop sessions sa araw na ito. Ngayong umaga, pag-uusapan natin ang panulaan ni Maria Cecilia Maki de la Rosa sa tulong ni Romulo Joey Bakiran Jr. Pag-usapan natin ang mga tulang nasa koleksyong Kampuhan.
Magandang umaga po. Ngayong unang session ng Biyernes ay pag-uusapan natin ang koleksyong Kampuhan ni Maki de la Rosa o Maria Cecilia de la Rosa. Si Maki, sa kanyang mga kaibigan, ay isang batang makata at nung bata siya, meron siyang uncle na writer din at sinabi dahil nakita mahusay siya sa English ay sinabihan siyang magiging writer, no? At yun ay parang naging hamon sa kanyang 2 dekadang mahigit na hanapin ang sarili bilang manunulat. At ngayong umaga ay makikita natin ang kanyang proseso o destinasyong narating sa kasalukuyan. The usual, maraming karanasan dinaanan ang ating batang makata para sa matagpuan yung kanyang boses o tinig. No, dumaan sa mga workshop at dumaan sa mga pag-aalangan kung meron ba siyang talento o may kakayahan. At unti-unti naman sa mga kasamang sa pag-aaral niya sa kolehiyo ay lumalabas siya upang sumali sa pangkat ng mga manunulat para mag-workshop para mapabilis ang proseso ng kanyang pangarap. At hindi naman siya nabigo, unti-unting narating ang proseso o rather ang pagkatagpo ng sarili, no? Matagal ngunit nakarating din siya doon at yun nga ang titignan natin, ano? Ang mga unang tula ni Maki ay mga makalipunan din ngunit hindi katulad nitong ating babasahin ngayon o ipipresenta niya mamaya. At siya ay kung titignan natin yung mga tula na ngayon ay mailalagay sa tradisyon ng matatawag nating revolusyonaryong panitikan, ano? Mahaba ang tradisyon nito. In fact, ang nagtayo ng ating pinakamahabang revolutionary o kontra-gobyernong kilusan ay English major, no? At nagsimulang katulad ng ating manulat ngayon, nagsulat ng mga revolusyonaryong tula sa Ingles bago naging sumabak sa larangang sa labas, ano? So nagsimula sa pagsulat ng tula, no? At mabuti na lamang itong ating kasama ay nagpatuloy at nasama sa mga, kung babalikan natin ang tradisyon ng aktivismong pagtula, ay makikita natin ng ilang figurang sinusundan ni Maki, no? Mapalad siya at hindi nagaya, no, sa mga katulad na mga mag-aaral na sumali dito, no, katulad ni Karen Empeño at Sherlyn Cadapan na naiisip nating ganito ang dating sitwasyon ni Maki, ngunit nakalabas siya dito sa sitwasyong ito at ngayon ay binabalikan yung proseso o kasaysayang kanyang dinaanan. May mga ilang figura ding maalala tayo sa kanyang pagsisikap, katulad ni Lorena Barros at mga katulad. Ang pinakamalapit sa henerasyon kay Maki ay si Kerima Tariman na naglabas ng kanyang panulaan mga ilang taon na nakakaraan. Dito natin maihahanay ang kanyang pagtula. Sa poetika ng aktivismo, minsan ay nasama dito sa workshop si Axel Pinpin at sinabi niya na pinakamapalad ang mga aktivistang makata sapagkat hindi na sila kailangang humanap ng audience. Nandito na agad ang audience at sa katotohanan, ang pagtula at ang aksyon ay isa. Kapag sulat nila ng tula at binasa ito sa audience, ay nagkakaroon ng immediate na visa. Hindi katulad ng mga petty burgess na makata na nag-emote-emote pa at nag-iisip kung sino ba ang audience sila at nagsusulat para sa sarili. Ang mga makatang aktivista ay mayroong araw-araw yugto-yugtong silbing nagagawa sa kanilang panulat. May naghihintay na audience sa kanilang susulatin at ang bisa ng kanilang tula ay aktwal at nararamdaman sa pagbibigay ng direksyon o ng lakas doon sa pagkilos na hinihintay ng kanilang audience na mismo ay ang masa. Ngunit umalis si Maki sa ganoong sitwasyon at nag-aral at sandaling nilimot yung kanyang karanasan sa karanasang iyon. Ngunit hindi niya nalilimutan at dahil siya ay napasok sa larangan ng pagsulat, niisip niyang mabuti kung ano bang mangyayari doon sa karanasan niya, kung merong silbi o meron pa ba itong salik sa kanyang buhay ngayon. At dahil inisip niya ay siya naman ay nag-aaral ng malikhaing pagsulat sa universidad, ay naisip ng magandang material ito bukod sa tawag dito isang affirmation ng kanyang karanasang sa kanyang karanasang sa kabundukan. Ang Kampuhan nung una naging estudyante ko siya, akala kong Kampuhan ay yung nandito lamang sa UP, yung dating dito sa may CP Garcia. At nung ine-explain niya, natutulaan niya yung mga bagay sa paligid ng Kampuhan ng lumad, may mga nakasampay na damit, may mga bagay sa paligid. Iniisip ko parang mahinang klase ng collection kasi mga parang bagay poetry lamang na titignan mo yung bato, titignan mo yung halaman sa paligid, tutulaan mo na. Pero meron siyang mga tulang ipinakita sa klase na umaangat naman kahit sa mga kasabayan niya, sa classmates niya, may tinula siyang isang pusa na namatay, natagpuan niya doon sa isang gilid ng daanan. Pero yung treatment ay parang merong second level. So parang alam na natin kung pag may namatay at may katawang nakakalat sa daan ay merong tawag dito, merong social meaning na kumakabit. Parang may ganong abilidad si Maki tungkol sa kanyang tawag dito, poetika ng bagay poetry, Pero may natagpuan siyang, yun nga ang ironic dito, mayroon siyang tagpuang koleksyon na parang inspiration niyan kung paano ba yung napakaraming karanasan mula sa nakaraan ay mabibigyan ng boses. Ang nakita niya ay dahil literature major naman ay binabasa ang lahat, na may nadaanan siyang koleksyon, ang Spoon River Anthology ni Edgar Lee Masters. Saan yung mga sementeryo at yung mga namatay na mamamayan magkakatabi dun sa nicho ay nagchichismisan pa, mga persona ng tauhan sa isang community, ay para may nakita siyang analogy doon sa ginagawa niyang koleksyon at ginawa niyang parang tawag dito padron o inspiration. At yun nga, lumitaw yung Kampuhan at bigla na lamang humugos ay yung kasi parang ang nangyari ay nahuli yung iba't ibang karakter doon sa kampo, no? Lahat ng tauhan doon, mga kadre, mga kasama sa kultural at army nung Kampuhan ay pinagsalita niya, no? Hindi pinagsalitang diretso katulad nung kay Edgar Lee Masters na may persona, kundi mayroong isang nangingibabaw na central intelligence na nakikita yung lahat doon sa nangyayari doon sa kampo, at ikinukwento ito at binibigyan ng tula, ano? At yun nga, sa tingin ko ay kahit western yung peg na trigger ay may sariling tawag dito katangian na lumitaw dito sa kanyang panulaan. Kung ikukumpara ito sa mga sinusundan niyang tradisyon ng poetics of activism, naiiba yung kay Maki sapagkat may dalawang klase ng the usual na activist poem ay yung alam na natin, yung grim and determined, taas kamao, sumisigaw lagi ang boses at nauuna diyan yung salitang ibagsak, durugin, and all that, grim and determined. Hindi naman lahat ng ganon ng tula aktivismo. Meron ding sa katotohanan ang mas malakas na tradisyon sa activist poetry ay yung lyricism o yung elegy kapag may lalo na ito yung pattern usually na nangyayari. May namatay na kasama, tutulaan niya ng mga kasamang makata, pupurihin, elegy, kaya maraming images ng dugo, ng mga nabasag na bungo and all that, medyo grim nga, siyempre hindi naman lahat ganoon ang tulang aktivismo. Meron ding tahimik, kung titignan natin yung mga ibang anthology na merong ang isang example na popular ay yung kay Joey Ayala, yung magkabila tawag dito ano ba yung title ng song, parang aktivista yung dalawang yun, yung kinakantahan nung singer o nung persona sa song, nagkahiwalay sila nung rebelde niya. Ayun, walang hanggang paalam, parang paalaman sila at yung isa nasa bundok, yung isa nasa baba, parang gano'n. Merong mga tula na nasulat ang mga namumundok, mga aktivista, rebelde, na may parang ganito rin. Merong meron din naman kasi silang ligawan sa itaas. At merong mga masasakit na paalaman tulad ng kanta ni Joey Ayala. Pero may isang poem si Clarita Roja, yung Alitap-tap, nagpaalaman yung dalawang rebelde, bababa na yung isa. Siguro sa Bicol din ito kasi pagtawid nila sa ilog, sa kabilang pampang, merong punong-puno ng alitap-tap. So, doon sila nagpaalaman and all that. Siyempre yung image nung naglalagablab na alitap-tap, tinap na yun ni Clarita Roja na yung kalungkutan pero at the same time merong revolutionary yung dapat gawin, ay parang naglalagablab na litap-tap, at ang puno ay puno ng buhay, ay yung tabing ilog ay lumalagas lang, mga ganon, in other words lyrical yung mode, itong kay kay Maki ay naiiba doon sa mga iyon. May sarili siyang boses, may sarili siyang approach dito sa material na ganito, experience na ganito. Specifically dahil ito ay ang milyo niya ay Bicol, talagang lumitaw yung pagka-Bicol dito, no? Sa halaman, sa tauhan, sa terrain, sa feel, ano? Kahit yung mythology ay nagamit dito, no? Sa kanyang effort, sa kanyang concert, ano? Concert of sorts, ano? Concerted effort. At yun nga, ang boses ay wala na dito yung grim and determined. Hindi rin naman ito yung super lyrical na katulad nitong Alitap-tap ni Clarita Roja. At hindi rin naman ito yung super rhetorical na approach. No? Parang ito ay very casual. Casual pero hindi casual, parang gano'n. Parang paano ba i-describe? Parang conversational pero hindi rin, parang merong timpla na sarili si Maki. At parang effortless pero sa pagkakakwento niya sa kanyang mga sa kanyang poets ay pinagdusahan, ano, pinagdusahan. At yun nga, sa bawat at talagang mahalata mong hindi ang mga issues kasi dito sa tulang aktivismo ay kung minsan ay yung mga activists ay yung mga makatang galing sa city ay ang issue ay pinepeke ang boses ng masa, samantalang iba naman yung boses ng masa, iba rin yung pamamaraan nila ng pagsasalita. Merong pamamaraan, kuminsan may kailangan silang tumulan ng tugmat sukat, kuminsan yung makatang nasa syudad ay hindi alam yung pangalan ng mga objects na nandun sa area, mga ganon. No? So maraming usapin tungkol dito sa authenticity ng pagsulat na ginagamit ang boses ng persona ng rebelde. No? Pero dito mukhang kay Maki mukhang hindi nagkakataliwasan itong issue, itong site na ito. Pero at the same time, hindi naman din siya gloating. No? Parang natural. Parang tinitignan niya pabalik and merong parang tone ng reflection. No? So, yun, yung aking naramdaman dito sa collection na ito. No? At yun nga, sa ganitong collection siguro mas maigi kung pakikinggan natin mula sa nag-produce ng concert na ito, ng mga lyrics na ito. Pakinggan po natin si Maria Cecilia de la Rosa para sa kanyang Kampuhan.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Joey. Gusto ko pong pasalamatan lalo yung emphasis doon sa batang Makata. Ayan po. Meron po akong ihinandang PowerPoint na maikli, pero ano lang to, pang distract lang. Ayan po. Next slide po agad. Ayan. Gusto ko lang pong ipasilip yung nilalaman ng Kampuhan. Sakit kasi natin, meron pong 25 na tula. So hanggang dyan, kung nababasa nyo po, hanggang sa lamesa. Pero lahat-lahat ay 55 sila. So steady lang po tayo dito sa slide na ito. Sige po. Yung proyekto ko po ay tugon sa ilang bagay. Una, sa hamon sa sarili na magsulat sa paraang proyekto. Kasi hindi ako methodical na writer. kahit yung dula, dinadaan ko sa swerte yung pagsusulat, tapos sa revision na lang ako nagdudusa. Kaya yung pagsusulat sa akin ng tula, kinukumpara ko siya sa craving, parang pagmemeryenda o panonood ng feel-good na palabas. Ang una kong collection sa ganitong paraan na buo. Walang plano, walang balangkas, walang takdang panahon ng pagsusulat, revision, pagpapasa. So walang disiplina siya. Pinopost ko lang siya sa Facebook, tapos tinipon ko. Kaya sinubukan ko magproyekto dito sa Kampuhan kasi na-realize ko na dapat pala pinoproyekto yung entry sa palangka. Ang lalim ng ang lalim ng motibasyon ng rason. First time ko nung magplano sa pagtula, siyempre nung mag-MA na, napipilitan na ako magproyekto ng mga koleksyon, problematisa at managinip ng poetics. Kumbaga nag-iisip na ako ng menu sa halip na maghalongkat sa cabinet o bumili sa tindahan ng memeryendahin. So nakita ko yung benepisyo ng pagpaplano, pagbabalangkas para magkaroon ng solid na koleksyon. Pangalawa, tugon ito doon sa, syempre, academic requirement dahil ito rin po yung aking graduate thesis. Pangatlo, tugon sa hamon na magkwento. Kasi ako talaga may malaki akong paghanga at inggit sa mga kwentista. At gusto ko tong sabihin ng live sa ating 1 million viewers na personal kong dito sa mga ka-fellow ko na ang laki ng paghanga ko na sa inyong mga sinulat at wala lang, in all lang ako. Tapos gusto kong maging katulad ninyo pero nahihirapan talaga akong magkwento. Pero marami akong gustong ikwento. So, awa ng Diyos, nadadaan ko naman siya sa tula. So ano po yung katangian ng koleksyong ito? Sabi ko mga tula ito tungkol sa kasama at saka sa revolusyon, pero hindi ito revolusyonaryong mga tula. Para kasi maging revolusyonaryo ang tula, kailangan committed mismo yung makata. Kung siguro sinulat ko ito nung nandoon pa ako, pwede siyang makategorize sa ganon, pero hindi na. At kailangan ma-validate ang mga tula ng audience na tinatakda ng tanong na para kanino. May kakayahan ba itong magpropaganda? Siguro naman, pero wala sa intent kasi yung propaganda ay organizational. May kakayahan bang magbigay ng parangal sa martir? Meron, kasi kaya namang gawin iyon ng individual. In fact, ito ang purpose ng tula, ng ilang tula kung hindi man ng buong collection. May kakayahan ba itong baguhin ang lipunan? Siyempre wala. Sa thesis, ginamit ko ang theory ng comrade ni Jody Dean bilang framework, hindi sa pagsusulat, kundi sa pagbabasa. Gusto ko lang ipasilip yung mundo ng kampuhan batay sa pagsusuma niya sa mga praksis ng comradeship. At ito rin lang naman yung gusto kong gawin dito. May gusto akong ipasilip. Ang pagmumundo sa kampuhan bilang mundo ng comrades, ang kampuhan bilang practice ng comradeship. Bago ba ito? Siyempre hindi. Sabi nga ni Sir, sa 52 years na yon, simulat sa pool, tinutulaan na ang red. Pero nakasunod pa rin ito siyempre sa tradisyon ng panulaang pambansa demokratiko. I'd say na pag nabasa ito ng comrade o ng masa, hindi sila ma-alienate sa wika, sa form, at sa sensibilidad. So sabi ko kanina, yung tanong na para kanino, mahirap isagot dito yung sinabi ni Mao na para sa manggagawa, magsasaka, kawal, kasi honestly, hindi ko sure kung paano ito makakarating sa kanila. Ang tiyak ko sa lahat, magkakaroon ng kopya nito ang UP Library. So ibig sabihin, pwede siyang mabasa ng estudyante at guro na nagre-research. Hindi pa nga yung leisure reading. Isang posibilidad, kung magiging libro, saka lang siguro magkakaroon ng mas malawak-lawak na audience. Ganito po yung proseso ng pagsusulat ko. Nagtakda naman ako ng simpleng parametro. Una, ipapamagat sa isang ordinaryong bagay, yun nga, bagay poetry, na makikita sa kampuhan o sa vicinity nito. Pangalawa, hanggang 2 salita lang yung pamagat. Pangatlo, hindi siya gamit militar. Sa 55 na tulang ito, yung una at huli lamang yung exceptions. Ang unang tula ay introduktoryo o payong ng koleksyon na sa mga salita na ni The Great Lian Borlongan ay carrier single. Ang huli naman ay pasulong, yun yung tanging gamit militar. Kasi ito yung bala na nakasalang sa chamber ng baril. Gusto ko itong i-retain kasi yung pasulong kasi hindi lang siya noun kundi adverb din. Paano? Pasulong. Pasaan? Pasulong. So sabi ko sa poetics, yung ilang tula tungkol sa krisis ay walang iniiwan na revolutionary optimism. Pero ito, sinasara ko yung buong collection sa isang maayos na disposition. pasulong, hopeful at totoo sa diwa ng comrade. Aware naman ako na may mga tulanang ang pamagat duyan, anahaw, gitara, kuliglig, etc. Pero hindi ako nag-aalala rito na parang hindi na original yung tula kasi may kaparehong title. Gusto ko ngayon kasi lalong napapamalas yung pagiging common ng mga bagay na tinutulaan. Karaniwang paksa ng mga reb na makata at kahit hindi reb na makata, pinapaksa din itong mga bagay na ito. Ang ibang pamagat ay nasa Bicol o di kaya ay naka-code na very particular sa unit na inspiration nito. Gusto ko lang gamitin yung salita mismo na ginagamit sa Kampuhan at yung mga exclusive na vocabulary tulad ng security plants. Sa unang versions ng tula, naglalagay po ako ng footnotes to explain certain words. Kunwari, yung smuggle, mula sa salitang smuggled kasi ang reputasyon ng mga tsinela sa Masbate, smuggled goods from Cebu. Maraming Bicol words tsaka Kampuhan slang. So marami ring footnotes at italics na habang tumatagal, medyo naiinis na ako sa itsura. So sabi ko, magigets naman to ng mambabasa, sure ako. So tinanggal ko na yung italics, footnotes, quotation marks sa dialogues. Tapos, ayan. May nag-iisang, sabi ko si Saramago. May nag-iisang footnote na pinag-iisipan ko na rin tanggalin. So yun lang po, naglista lang ako ng mga ordinaryong bagay, tinaya ang halaga nila o materiality sa Kampuhan at inalala ko lang kanino ko sila na-associate. Minsan naman, isang comrade maalala ko at pag-iisipan, anong bagay ang na-associate ko sa kanya. So mga tula po ito sa araw-araw na buhay ng kasama, tungkol sa mga activities, kultura, events, ganyan-ganyan. Mga normal na pakiramdam at mga complex na problema. Siyempre, maingat pa rin ako sa pagsusulat. Gusto kong manatiling maganda yung reputasyon ng movement. Not that kaya nitong sirain, itong mga tulang ito, ang reputasyong iyon. Siyempre hindi. O kahit ng ano pa mang tula, o kwento, o fake news, o black props. Pero di ba, hindi naman talaga perfectong movement. At siyempre, lalong-lalo na yung mga individuals nito. Pero sa kabila noon, nananatiling pinakamataas ang pagtingin ko sa organisasyong ito. At natural lang na lumalabas ang pagtingin ito sa mga tula. Hindi ko pinipilit pagandahin ang imahe ng mga kasama kasi sadyang beautiful sila, mabubuting tao, not to mention magaganda, sadyang maligaya, disiplinado, matalino, masigasig, humble, funny, at human, syempre. So nagkwento lang ako ng ilang memories, pasa-pasang anecdotes, mga generic na rev themes. Lahat dumaan sa pag-filter ko sa sariling estetika, poetika, training kung mamarapatin. So kasama na rin yung turo at tulong ng mga mentor, professor, peers. Labo-labo na rin yung impluwensya ng mga paborito kong makata. Tulad ni nabanggit kanina ni Sir ni Kerima Lorena Tariman, ni Marjorie Agusin at marami pang iba. So ano pa ang kulang? Tumigil na muna ako sa 55 kasi nagustuhan ko na yung curation. Ganito ako ginawa, naglista ako ng 85 o siguro 95 na bagay, tapos naglista ako ng mga pangalan ng comrades, tapos gumawa ako ng matrix. Marami yung hindi na ituloy isulat, may ilan ding pangit kaya naligwak. Nakikita ko yung ugnayan ng mga tao habang kinocurate ko siya, tapos medyo nakukumpara ko na dun sa unti-unting pagre-reveal ni Master sa ugnayan ng mga taga Spoon River. So nakontento na ako doon, happy na ako doon. Naghanda rin naman ako na baka padagdagan ng panel ko yung corpus. Pero mukhang nasapatan naman na din sila. So lalo akong naging happy. So ngayon po 55 tula, kaya pa namang singitan o dugtungan o i-complicate. Tingnan po natin. Kung sakali, gusto ko pa siguro mag-eksperimento ng kaunti sa form. Isa pang posibilidad din, naalala ko ito nung nag-lecture si Sir Rio, yung tigsik. Pwede ko palang pwede ako maglagay ng ilang pirasong tigsik din sa collection. Tapos meron po ako ditong ilang sample ng sinasabi kong pag-eksperimento. Next slide po. Kasi nung naghahanap ako ng RRL, late ko na to nakita, na-curate ko na yung corpus. Tapos tawag nito. Ito yata yung binabanggit ni Sir Edward kahapon nung nakaraang araw, yung kay Chong Helas na diary or journal ng isang comrade from long time ago. Ganyan. Tapos, ganitong form ang gusto kong ma-achieve, parang pa-diary na medyo ang pakakawalan yung rhymes at magre-rely sa poetic image. Next slide po. Ayan. Basahin ko lang itong isang sample. Ito ba yung English yan? 5 a.m., foggy fields, floating tops of coconut trees, pale outline of hills, ducks, pigs, chickens, and a carabao grazing in the dew-wet fields. While a young peasant riding on his carabao goes through the mist for an early start. Anong tawag nito? Parang parang Chinese poetry, reminds me of Lusun. At syempre si Mao. Next slide po. Sige po, lagpasan na natin to. Next slide po. Ito isa sa mga paborito ko kasi parang sa ilalim ng puting ilaw pero di hamak na mas maganda. Notes lang naman ito pero yung kagandahan niya ay doon sa parang mas cinematic at yun nga yung poetic image na nagagawa niya. Ayan. Tapos yung pinakahuli, huling sample po. Next slide po. Isang babaeng naliligo ng hubot-hubad sa ilog, kasabay ang isang baboy. Gayunman ang daloy ng tubig ay mula sa babae patungong baboy. Ayan, medyo cinematic ang niya, ang dating sa akin, parang naka-color grade. So, ayan po. Ganun ang kung padadagdagan ito, depende po sa mga suggestions ng mga tao. Ganun siguro yung mga gusto kong idagdag. So, maraming salamat po at bukas na po ako para sa inyong mga komento.
Salamat, Mac. Salamat,
Joey, ako kung
Maki.
wala.
Sige. Salamat at bukas na ang komentaryo at pagbibigay ng pagtatanong kay Maki mula sa mga kasama dito sa workshop. Si Sir Jun ang unang nagpahiwatig na gustong magsalita. Sir Jun?
Oo, Maki. Kumusta ka? Yung
Okay lang.
kasing ginawa mo ang napapanahon. Kasi minsan nagkaroon ako ng chance ng makausap yung mga mahilig mag-discuss dito na nasa Netherlands. Ano ang silbi ng protest art kung hindi naman ito naiintindihan ng masa? So yun yung ang protest art ba ay dapat agit lang. So yung napakalalaking issue eh. So yung hindi ko alam kung sinadya mo pero nagawa mo yung humanizing the revolution. At napakahaba nung tradisyon nung sinusundan mo eh. Makis, baka lang kung nagagawa ka ng thesis, I hope you don't mind mag-uumpisa ka sa STR. Alam mo yon. Susunod ka kila Jason Montana, kila Magbanwa, kila Chris Montañez, kila Eric Acosta, kila Alan Hasmines. Ibibigay ko sa iyo itong mga huli. Baka katulong sa iyo. Yung kay Benito Kiloy, napakapayak ng wika, napaka-lyrical. Maliwanag sa kanya na ang kinakausap niya ay masa, ibig sabihin, ordinaryong tao. Si Erickson Acosta, nagpi-flip top pa siya. Flip top, imagine, flip top. Tapos isa pang gusto ko si Vegas. Alam mo, pati yung may mga erotic nga ritong tula eh. No? So, yung napakalayo na, ito, para sa yung consumption lang to. Typilo doon sa area mo. May nagpadala sa akin ng kopya. Yung binanggit mo doon na yung nawawala kasi yung dati yung mga panitikan sa kanayunan napaka-predictable ng ending. Kung hindi sumama sa rally ay namundok. So unti-unting nababago yun yung pag-humanize. Ang nagawa mo yung pagbibigay yung pagre-record ng Little Lives. at saka yung little histories. Na yun yung nawawala eh. Imagine mo kung yung lahat ng katipunan nag-record nung ano yung ginagawa nila nung araw. O lahat ng hook nag-record. O hindi lahat, madami. And then, mabubuo yung kasaysayan. Ito yung mga kasaysayan ng mga ayaw nating, yung itinatanggi, yung tinatatwa, yung wala sa mass media, yung wala sa mainstream. In fact, pag pinag-aralan natin yung Philippine lit, yung lit ng middle class yung ando doon, yung panitikan ng kanayunan, parang subcategory lamang. Gusto kong pansinin yung ilan sa yung mga snapshot mo na natutuwa ako, yung mga tao, si Jenny, yung jacket, at saka laptop. Akala mo ang liit-liit na tula na akala mo payak na payak. Pero yung emosyon na ano yung pag-ibig, ano yung longing, ano yung urge, lalo na yung jacket, saka yung laptop, hindi siya madadaling tula, no? Gusto ko yon na yung mahirap na padali mo na siya namang katangian ng mahuhusay, nagagawang simple. Pagtapos yung buhay, at saka yung mga ordinaryong tao, tsaka yung pang-araw-araw na ginagawa nila, ano yung kinakain, paano magtayo ng kampuhan, nabuhay mo. Minsan meron akong isang okasyon, yung mga libro na dapat binabasa ng sandatahan, ilagay ko doon sa mesang gano'n. Alam mo kung ano yung binasa nila? Yung Ninja Turtle. So, ang tagal, no? Napakahirap. Ano yung realidad? Ano yung... And therefore, yung ginagawa mo ay paggagawa ng yung panibagong tunguhin ng pagsusulat na yung canon, yung standard ay mababago. Kasi ang ina-address mo ay hindi naman aanin mo yung pagkaganda-gandang protest poem na ang nagbabasa lang naman ay yung kapwa mo Makata. Na pag binabasa mo sa masa ay hindi naman maintindihan. So, masaya ba tayo? Siguro yung last Makit, magko-quote ako kay Dante, kay Dalton, Rocky Dalton. Sabi niya, poetry, pardon me for having helped you to understand that you are not made of words alone. Ang gumawa nito si Rene, yung Makata natin, si Rene, ano ba apelido ni Rene? Yung poet natin sa Baguio bago Abiba.
Abiba po.
Oh, yan. Ang ginagawa. Bakis, salamat at aabangan ko yung libro mo. Pwede bang right away pahiram ng ilan sa aking ginagawang antolohiya?
Sige po.
Okay.
Sige
Yun
po.
lang, alam ko marami sasabihin yung iba pang gusto mag-participate. Again, Makis, congratulations at salamat sa iyong akda.
Salamat Sir Jun. Ang nakasunod natin ay si Eric. Eric, go.
Opo. Maki. Hello Maki, ang ganda nito. Actually, siguro yung sinasabi, nag-agree ako sa mga points ni Sir Jun na yun, dapat naiintindihan ng masa. Siguro nga ako yung masa eh. kasi ako kapag nagbabasa ako ng poetry, madami naman na nagagandahan ako. Pero kapag iba, minsan hindi ko na naiintindihan, naibababa ko na yung libro, hindi ko na naitutuloy. Ako naman yung may problema doon kasi, ewan ko, frustration ko din actually ang poetry. Gusto kong matuto. Kaya lang, hindi ko alam kung paano magsisimula, ano yung mga babasahin ko, o walang nagtuturo sa akin, o hindi ko alam. Pero anyway, inuuna ko naman yung iba kong craft. So anyway, etong gawa mo, kaya ako nasabing parang pwedeng ako yung masa. Kasi naintindihan ko siya eh. Natapos ko siya hanggang dulo. At meron siyang impact sa akin na yun nga, na-humanize mo yung kampuhan, yung mga kasama. Hindi naman mahaba yung sasabihin ko, pupurihin ko lang actually. Particularly na gustong-gusto ko dito yung eksena ng yung sa radyo, yung namatay si Lima Tango. Ang bigat nun. Ang bigat nun kasi siya mismo ay nagmo-monitor siya sa kalaban na kasi wala siyang kasamang mga kakampi pero parang naging kaibigan or virtual na kaibigan niya yung mga minomonitor niya, no? Tapos nung pinagluksa din niya yung kamatayan ni Lima Tango na tama ba ang intindi ko, ito ay lieutenant si LT. Ayan, so tapos yung mismong pinakita nila na namatay siya, hinayaan siyang mamatay sa bundok, hindi siya makuha. Samantalang kapag naglilipat ang general ng kampo, may helicopter. So parang hindi lang yung mga kasama, pati yung militar, nabibigyan mo ng storya, humanize niya, ika nga. Napakaganda, may connection talaga sa tao, at saka parang hindi naman masyadong mabilis ang kilos, hindi naman maingay ang salita, pero dama mo deep yung mga sinasabi ng salita. Yun lamang po ang sasabihin ko. Maraming salamat and congrats, Maki. Ang napakaganda nito.
Yun, salamat Eric. Ang kasunod po natin ay si Miss Mary Ann.
Good morning po sa lahat. Good morning, Maki. Gaya ni Eric, mag-congratulate ako sa iyo kasi nakikita ko yung maturity ng sensibility dito sa collection na sinubmit mo. Nasabi mo nga, pang 25 pa lang ito out of 55. So I can only imagine the entire collection kung mababasa ko. Nagustuhan ko yung maturity ng sensibility, yung empathy. Nakita ko na yung diwa mo nandoon talaga sa ipinaglalaban ng revolusyon. Tapos what I really appreciate most is the mix of maganda yung pagkaka-mix ng iba-ibang form ng poems. Like kasi meron kang poem kagaya ng palara, tapos meron kang poem na kagaya ng dyaryo o anahaw, tapos meron kang poem na parang kabibe. Tapos yung kasing yung protest poetry kasi sa tingin ko, mahalaga yung point na sinabi ni Sir Jun kasi bakit nga naman tayo magsusulat kung yung target audience naman natin, hindi naman natin nakikater yung need nila para mahikayat natin sila na basahin yung mga sinusulat natin. Naiintindihan ko yung point na yon. Pero yung sa tingin ko kasi, meron din kasing protest poetry na medyo quiet lang yung treatment, yung hindi masyadong makibaka. Meron din kasi namang mga ganon, yung medyo subtle lang. Meron din kasing mga makarevolutionaryong masa na nakaka-appreciate noon, kaya lang hindi sila yung masyadong mga vocal. So kung ang problema ay yung limited yung iyong readership because of your style nitong collection na ito, sa tingin ko hindi naman siya masyadong problema. Lalo na kung meron namang mix dito sa collection, iba-iba naman merong mga quiet and subtle, pero merong mga a little bit more prosaic and medyo mas declared yung pagiging makarevolutionaryo niya. Lastly, meron lang akong isang kwento kasi palagi itong sinisingil sa atin when we write about our province, our region. Did you ever feel the need or the pressure to talk about na kailangan mong isali yung pagiging Bicolana mo doon? Did you ever feel the need for that? And kung na-feel mo yung pressure na gawin yun, sa tingin mo ba, is it valid ba or tama ba na i-require yun sa'yo? So, yun lang po ang aking contribution dito sa discussion na ito. Congrats, Maki. Hangang-hanga ako dito sa ginawa mo. Maraming salamat po.
Salamat, Mary Ann. Oh. Makita mo yung ginagawa mo, nagno-notes muna, iniipon yung mga talata, sasagutin mamaya. No? Pakinggan natin ngayon si Arlo para sa kanyang tanong o komento.
Salamat, Sir Joey. Pagbati, una-una sa lahat, pagbati, Maki. Gusto ko salungguhitan yung binanggit niya kanina na yung collection ay hindi niya parang ika-categorize o inihahanay sa panitikang revolusyonaryo gawa ng fact na wala na siya doon sa Kampuhan o hindi na yung sa kanyang salita, hindi na siya committed. Sa akin, napakahalaga nung distinction na yun kasi para sa akin, in a way, medyo hamon itong collection na ito doon sa mga pinangahawakan nating pagpapalagay at implicitong demands sa panitikang revolusyonaryo. Kasi sa isang banda, gusto ba natin na yung panitikang revolusyonaryo ay nag-a-adhere sa demands ng mga existing literary institutions? Or sa kabilang banda, dahil nga at the end of the day, isa sa mga functions ng panitikang revolusyonaryo ay i-popularize at itaguyod yung mga simulain ng kilusang pambansang demokratiko. So nandun yung ganung demands. Pero ang kinaganda ng koleksyong ito, nandun yung mga tula na in a way parang sinusubukang tumulay doon sa, or at least i-satisfy yung mga ganong klase ng demands, yung hinahanap natin sa tula. Yung ayaw ng marami na makita sa mga ganitong klase ng tula na parang sobrang GND, etc. Pero at the same time, gusto ko rin yung collection ito, particular yung isang tula, yung Anahaw. Kasi in a way, subtle job rin siya doon sa pinagdaan ng tradisyon ng pagsusulat ng ganitong klase ng panitikan. Gusto ko yung linya na at the end of the day, guerrilla muna sila bago sila makata. Kasi nung mga nakaraang mga dekada, nagkaroon kasi ng hindi ko alam kung sinasadya o hindi, parang at gawa rin siguro ito ng ng kakulangan ng pag-aaral sa ideolohiya at revolusyonaryo sa kasaysayan ng revolusyon, yung pagro-romanticize na doon sa panitikan bilang bagay na magliligtas sa sambayanan. At wala dito yon, at kahit yung mga malinaw na kahit yung mga nasa kanayunan, kahit yung mga nasa larangang armado, kung magsusulat man sila, wala rin sila nung ganoong klase ng paniniwala. Pero for some reason, yung mga nagsusulat sa lungsod, halimbawa, o yung mga nasa legal na nagsusulat sa ganito, parang kinakandili pa rin nila yung ganong klase ng pagro-romanticize. At tingin ko mahalaga itong koleksyong ito kasi pinapaalala ni Maki bilang isang makata at bilang isang minsang lumahok sa ganitong larangan na yung pagsusulat o yung panitikan, hindi siya yung pinakamapagpasyang guhit tagpuan ng paikisangkot. So, yun. Favorite ko, bukod sa pang-iwang na binanggit kanina nila, favorite ko yung Anahaw. So, hindi pagbati kayo. Kay Maki. Ganda.
Salamat, Arlo, sa mariing mga pansin. May mga pila pa tayo rito, mahaba-haba. Susunod ay si Edward.
Gandang umaga po, Maki. Isang salita ko una mapangahas. Mapangahas itong obrang ito. Kahit na itanggi mo na ito ay 10 taon ang nakakaraan. Pag binasa mo yung mga tula, mararamdaman mong nandun ka sa lugar na yon, nabivisualize mo, may pagsasalarawan, may konting some extent parang romanticize, pero hindi naman gano'n, nakalapat din naman yung ilang eksena. Pero palagay ko kasi hindi ko kailangang hanapin yung mga ganong matinding tunggalian sa loob ng kwento o ng tula, kasi mukhang tingin ko iba yung intention ng tula, ang intention ng tula ay hindi lamang dokumentasyon, hindi ipakita kung ano yung tunggalian sa loob, kundi nais itong palakasin ang loob ng sinumang kabahagi nitong sinusulong na kilusan, di ba? Parang kumbaga pampalakas ng loob ang sino mang babasa nito. At palagay ko ang sinasabi ko mapanganib ito kasi, o mapanghas kasi to some extent din, mapanganib, ano? Sabi ko nga, nagdalawang isip din ako. Magko-comment ba ako? Alam mo, naka-upload ito. Pero ito napakapanghas, alam mo, sa mata ng utak ng mapurol na ahente ng Estado o na may kapangyarihan, ng simpleng salitang makita mo na sa tingin nila ay mapanganib, ay naghuhusga na kagad, nagbibigay ng hamon na o naguudyok sa kanila na may gustong patunguhan ang tulang ito. Gayunpaman, gaya na nabanggit ng iba, palagay ko pag nabasa ito ng karaniwan, kung ibabalik mo ito sa lugar na ito, ay ito'y magiging mabisa. No? Sa ganitong paraan, yung tula ay nagkakaroon ng silbi dun sa pinagmulan mong karanasan. Kung paano ito'y magpapaalab pa o magpapasigla pa ng kanilang damdamin. At sa maraming panahon sa kasaysayan ng Pilipinas, malaking naging papel ng tula eh. Kasi nung panahon ng martial law nga, tula rin, mga maikling tula ang ginagamit ng mga kalahok sa anumang protesta o maging sa kilusan. Involved sila, gumagamit sila ng tula para hindi lang maipahayag ang kanilang damdamin, kundi yung kabuang prosesong nangyayari doon sa pinapasukan nilang kilusan. Kaya bagamat mapanganib, palagay ko binabati kita, Maki. Ang aking description lamang sa iyo, ikaw ay isang batang makata na, meron lang akong medyo naguluhan ng konti kung bakit isang malabong propesiya, no? Yun lang. Pero the rest, it's okay, binabati kita. Sa aking palagay, ikaw ay isang batang makata na mapanghas na tumatawid sa taytay ng mapanganib na alapaap para makamit ang kaaya-ayang propesiya. Congrats, Maki.
Salamat, Edward. Nagtatangka ka na ring tumula, no? Mamaya papaliwanag ni Maki kung ano yung malabong propesiya. Ang nakalinya sa ating susunod ay si Roland.
Ako natutuwa sa workshop na ito dahil well represented yung Bicolano writing o writers na nasa kanilang mid-career. So para na-ensure na meron next generation of Bicolano writers that can hopefully take over the scene. Not just for Bicolano writing, pero for a kind of Philippine national literature na dinidevelop natin lahat. At nakikita natin yung range ng kanilang experiences and uniqueness ng kanilang places of origin sa Bicol. No? So wonderful yon dahil nagsisikan yung range of experiences ng Bicol. Gusto ko rin ito dahil na-inspire or peppered yung mga tula ng everyday underground movement terms, mga relatibo, mga arbalite, mga kung ano-ano na quite inclusive na ginagamit sa movement, no? So it's really a movement poetry. Kahit na wala na siya directly dun sa site ng Kampuhan, ay nandun pa rin ang pinagmulan at kinalabasan nitong mga tula na ito. At tungkol naman ito sa movement practices, everyday practices, yung pagpoposte, yung paggawa ng mga malong at yung iba pang uses ng sako, etc. No? Kailangan lang sa instance na to, dahil hinalo mo yung karanasan at yung produkto ng mga koleksyon ng tula sa Kampuhan sa Bicol, ay you need to find a way, Maki, para maibalik din ito sa kanila. At para makakuha ka rin ng feedback sa kanila sa mga tulang na-inspire ng pakikisalumuha mo sa kanila. Pero dahil nasa workshop tayo at aminado ka naman na ito ay resulta din ng MA thesis mo, syempre may kahilingan pa rin ng mga kasiningan at kung ano pa man ang inaasahan sa isang mid-career writer, also an MA creative writing, malikhaing pagsulat na student or graduate. No? So sa akin, ang tingin ko lang, kahit na napak-personal na dinanas itong mga tula na ito at yung mga tinapaksang tinatalakay sa tula, ang lumalabas sa akin, napaka-impersonal pa rin. yung parang hindi ko pa rin makita yung moral investment ng writer to participate in this movement at kung bakit ito yung kanyang tinutulaan. Ano yung uniqueness dito ng karanasan na yun. At gusto ko naman yung may self-contradictory na imbis na Les Miserables ang gusto mo ipalabas sa kanila ay Sound of Music ang gusto nila, ang pinanood nila. Pero at the same time, parang wala ka ring involvement dito, napaka-distantiated mo dun sa the telling of the experience. So parang kang observer rather than or a witness rather than someone who has directly experienced it. So baka naman gusto mong ma-evolve somehow yung more active agency ng yung author or yung poet rather than parang ina-account mo lang ito at quite random yung mga experiences mo dito batay sa naalala mo. So pwede rin siguro tumula ka rin parang open letters to Filipino artists as a kind of summing up ng karanasan mo dito. Yung parang kay Eman Lakababa na becomes a manifesto of involved or movement poetry or movement writers. Parang may kahilingan din sa panahon na to na to show a particular stance in which movement poets need to take at this point in time, no? As a way to synthesize also this experiences, wonderful experiences naman na tinalakay mo. I would also, down the line, kailangan mo talagang isulat itong collection na to. Dahil naging mahalaga itong bahagi ng buhay mo, ng decision mo sa buhay at hindi naman matatawaran yun. At nag-survive ka. Ibig sabihin, buhay ka pa at sa klase ng counterinsurgency wars na ginagawa ng natin. Pero on the other hand, ngayon tapos na siya, pag natuldukan mo na ito, then you need to proceed on to a kind of an actual petty B experience. Na how do you involve yourself in the movement or in the revolution that you once participated in with a direct hand sa kasalukuyang antas na nasa periphery tayo sa city ulit. So ano yung wonderful insights that can be drawn from here? Or ano rin yung mga nababalita mo everyday life ngayong panahon ng pandemic in which I'm sure the movement is still organizing, etc. So ano yung klaseng buhay meron sila ngayon? Ano yung mga concerns nila for vaccines, etc. na curiosity natin na klase din. Or kung may instances ng infection doon, how do they manage it in their own unique ways? Baka may mga tulakang ganun. Pero yun nga, mahalaga itong sulatin mo at i-publish mo pag may confidence ka na buo na siya at meron na siyang patutunguhan. Pagkatapos ito, I begin contemplating on a third project. Parang ito yung mga kailangan sulatin ng writers na dumanas ng ganito. But now that it is done, eventually, pag na-publish ito, then you need to conceptualize yourself in another kind of sphere of work within the revolution or the movement. Pero congratulations, Maki. Napakaganda nito collection na to.
Salamat po sa payo, Kuya Roland. Susunod po natin ay si Sir Butch.
Magandang umaga, Maki, sa inyong lahat. I wonder how helpful my remarks will be to Maki, but I wanted to bring a few things up, maybe from the point of view of someone who I should say was once a part of that movement. Siguro hindi yung armadong larangan, pero in other ways might have thought the same way at some time. I'm one of those people who joined the movement noong late 60s. Para sa akin, sa high school pa lang, after reading, in fact, The Forest ni Pomeroy. Kung isipin mo, medyo mababaw yung, in a sense, yung dahilan kung bakit ako pumasok. I was seduced by Pomeroy's language, and I really held on to that. I mean, to that kind of, in a sense, idealization of revolution, which of course it did not turn out to be, at least for me. What I like most in this collection is its quality of tenderness, which is something that was largely absent in the exhortatory poetry of past time. I understand why it had to be exhortatory at a certain time, and I'm glad to see that now we have a much more personal internalization of the conflict, although napupulangan pa nga si Ronald doon sa involvement sa engagement ng author mismo sa mga sitwasyon na kanyang sinasalarawan dito. And I just want to say that I really like that quality of it. And in fact, and this is siguro hindi na magagawa ni Maki ito for certain reasons, I would even like this to move on to the possibility of ambiguity and even doubt. Although I am sure that these things will probably not be allowed, and that's one of the things that I must say this affected me from the movement at a certain point when aesthetic decisions were made by committees, and I resisted that. Nung sinimulan namin noon yung pinangalangang dulaang sa deka halimbawa, unang-una ang tinatanghal pa namin noon ay mga siniting eksena mula kay Brecht, ano? At naalala kong parang pinagbawalan yan dahil ang estilong pinalit doon ay yung Peking opera. In other words, talagang may naging patakaran sa kung ano ang magiging uri ng kultura at pamamahayag na itataguyod ng kilusan. Sa bagay, kung isipin mo, parang workshop din lang naman yun. No? May mga panelista ka na nagsasabing, o ganitong gagawin mo dyan, at wala kami namang magawa noon kundi sumunod. Pero there was an element of me, at ayun na nga siguro yung pagka-Petit Burgues ko, that resisted that. And I came to the conclusion na talagang Petit Burgues ako. At susundin ko yung kung anong naiisip kong dapat gawin at sabihin. But I understand where this comes from, and I'm glad to see that even within the movement, there is a certain evolution of sensibility. But I do hope that you, even within that framework, that you can fight for individuality of expression, at least, even if you maintain a consistency of belief, because I really think that art should be organic and free to grow within the artist's imagination. Yun na lang.
Okay, maraming salamat, sir. Susunod po natin ay si Bomen.
Magandang umaga sa lahat din, at isang pagbati kay Maki sa kanyang mga tula, na natuwa nga akong basahin. Kaya lang yun nga, parang naalala ko na yung isinambit mo ay may mga iba pang tulang kasama na wala na dito sa ating yung nung nag-apply ka rito sa workshop ay may mga tulang kasama yon na hindi na naisama rito sa ating pinal na koleksyon. At actually may mga tula rin akong gustong-gusto kaya lang biglang wala na rito dito sa ating kasalukuyang version di-discuss. So ang gusto ko lamang ay dagdagan yung ilang mga punto ni Kuya Roland at saka ni JCR nababanggit din yung dating mga tula yung tulang aktivista na may negatibong pakahulugan siguro nung 70s yung mga pasigaw at saka yung mga taas kamao pero siguro tagal na yun kasi mula nung panahon ni na Emma ni na Hilasio yung nabanggit ni JCR na iba't ibang halimbawa halos wala na akong nababasang ganung mga tula yung mga revolutionary poetry in the negative sense there are of course but that's bad poetry like there's bad poetry everywhere Kuya, tingnan niyo sina Karima, sina Erickson, Acosta, they're very complex emotionally, At kumbaga ito yung sabihin natin ay isang malakas na bahagi yung lyrical na nabanggit nga ni Joey na tradisyon ngayon sa mga progresibo at revolutionaryong tula. Halos wala na talaga yung mga nababanggit na negatibong halimbawa ng 70s. Maybe there was that pressure to conform to certain models that came probably from China or elsewhere. Pero ngayon wala na yung ganyan. Ito ay nakikita nga dito kay Maki. This is how a lot of the current poetry is written. And some of it is quite complex, expressed out, paradoxical, etc. A lot of it is individual expression, pero nakakonekta in a very complex way with movement, Ngayon, ang nakikita kong halaga, doon sa iyong collection, ay nabanggit mo nga yung iba't ibang sitwasyon na nilalagyan mo, Pero yung masabi kong genre nito ay isang autobiographical na tala ng isang panahon sa kampuhan, kumbaga, isang kinailangang maitala ang karanasan na ito sa kampuhan, autobiographical at sa gayon ay mayroong distansya kaya nga yung problema ni Roland bakit parang masyadong may distansya pero sa katunayan halos yung kanyang genre na autobiographical na tala ay halos lumilikha na nitong distansyang ito at yung ginawa mo ay pagpoproseso ng karanasan na ito ay sa iyong isa-isa, bawat isa mga tungkol sa mga halaman, tungkol sa iba't ibang mga aktibidades, ay pagproproseso ng karanasan ito. At pwede pa nga magkaroon ng tipolohiya ng mga pamamaraan ng pagpoproseso. Ito ay completely, wala akong judgmental sa typology na to. It's, halimbawa, may mga tumatalikod, nagbabatikos, na dissolution, meron naman talagang ganyan, sa kahit anong kilusan. May mga nagsulat tungkol dito na parang glory days nila, Parang glory days nila yung panahon na yon, parang yung talaga yung naalala lang nila, siguro that's one form of revolutionary nostalgia, That's one thing, Tapos may mga nagsusulat din sa diwa ng patuloy na pag-ambag at pakikibaka, May mga kumikilos sa iba't ibang paraan sa iba't ibang mga larangan, iba't ibang pakikisangkot, Nagtatrabaho na sa opisina o nagtatrabaho na sa kung ano man bilang professional na artista o manunulat ganon kaya pwede natin tingnan yung iba't ibang siyempre what happens after the autobiographical event and there are so many possibilities and they also determine the way that you approach the material that you were trying to write about. Ngayon doon sa kampuhan na binabanggit mo, di ba yung kampuhan yung unang tula ay nandoon nakita mo unang-una yung nostalgia for that experience. Nandoon yung nakaraan. Pero tingin ko yung kampuhan na yun at yun na rin nasa tula ay panghinaharap. Kumbaga, panghinaharap. Kumbaga ito ay nakatuon sa kinabukasan kung saan itatayo ang ultimong kampuhan, whatever that means. Ultimong kampuhan. At yung panghinaharap na yun ay pagpapahayag ng patuloy na pakikisangkot, patuloy na na patuloy na pinanghahawakan ng manunulat ang ganung ang ethos ng pagbabago ng lipunan. So ayun sa aking palagay ay pwede itong maunawaan mula sa ganung perspektiba, maging ang kanyang tono, maging ang kanyang anyo bilang panitikan, at doon sa kanyang tradisyon na mga bukal ng panitikan ng revolusyonaryong kilusan na kanyang kinukuhaan ng sustansya. So gusto ko lang sabihin talaga na yung mga nasabi dito ng minsan mga negatibong revolutionaryong tula, wala nang ganyan halos today. That's a 70s trope, that's a 70s, siguro maybe 80s, panahon namin, maybe there were some really bad stuff. Pero everywhere there's bad poetry, and there's great poetry also from the revolutionary movement. Greater, as great or greater than anywhere else. Salamat.
Better tayo ng isang maikli. Salamat pala, Bomen, sa napakayamang at malalim na pag-assess dito sa panulaang revolusyonaryo. At pagbibigyan pa natin ng isang maikling comment na si Vim.
So lang ako, Sir Joey, papuri kay Maki. Yung Maki mo ba, Maki Baka?
Hindi naman po.
Hindi ko alam, magkasama pala tayo sa departamento. Natutuwa ako dahil kung nung una, diba, ang pagkakaalam natin sa paano lang pangkilusan o protesta, laging malungkot, galit, at marahas. Parang pinatunayan ng koleksyon mo na may kapangyarihan palang ngumiti o tumawa, at sa tingin ko yun ang kagalingan ng siste ng koleksyon mo. Nakikita ko nga na pwede kayong mag-collaborate ni Jerking, para parang tinitignan ko yung parang alpabeto, di ba? Nakikita mo yung mula anahaw hanggang kung ano man yung dadag mo sa letter C. Pero parang wala ka namang ganong intensyon. Ang gusto ko lang sabihin din yung baka meron kang punto de vista o pananaw na hindi kaya naming tagalabas na ipakita. Kasi galing ka sa loob eh. Kami kung meron kang sanang maipakitang halimbawa ng tula na ang pananaw ay sariwa mula kasi sa anggulo na hindi pa na isusulat. Kung ano man yun. Nagawa mo na naman dito eh. Kaya lang siguro nga baka, at maaaring yun ang sagot kay Papa Rolad na sa hinahanap niya. Baka, kasi yun yung pribilehyo na wala kaming mga tagalabas. O kung meron man, nandun sa mga kasama mo, samantalang hindi nila isinusulat o wala silang kapangyarihang isulat ito. At yun ang pwedeng bentahe mo, na pwede mong ipakita. Kasi kumbaga parang nakaka-zoom in, zoom out ka, nakakapasok at nakakalabas ka. At sa tingin ko, dapat mong ingatan yun, na isang pagkakataon, kundi man kapangyarihan, na wala ang iba. Yun lamang at pagbati sa yung chiste. Mabuhay ka.
Maraming salamat, Papa Bim. Mukhang iyon na ang pinakahuling komento at ngayon ay pakikinggan na natin si Maki para sa pagsagot niya sa mga naipong tanong at komento. Maki?
Maraming salamat po. Maraming salamat po sa lahat ng komento. Unahin ko po muna yung mga tanong para wala na akong malagpasan. Yung kay Mary Ann po muna, yung kailangan, yung nakaramdam ba ako ng pangangailangan na i-represent yung pagiging Bicolano, isali yung pagiging Bicolano. Hindi naman actually, parang natural lang naman din siyang lumabas dito sa collection kasi yun nga yung subject matter. So, yung tingin ko, yung tinatanong mo na yung kailangan, tama ba na i-require sa atin, yung ganon, parang hindi parang hindi hindi naman dapat ni-require. So tayo naman yung nagde-decide kung ano ang gusto nating isulat, kung ano yung feel natin na kailangan nating yung kung saan tayo nagbe-belong, kasi medyo rin ako dun sa pag-appropriate ng mga tinig ng mga ng mga buhay. So kung ano yung alam ko, kung ano yung buhay ko din bilang tao. Parang doon lang muna ako magkukulong sa mga kaya kong isulat. Ano pa ba? Yung kay kay Sir Edward, may tanong siya tungkol doon sa malabong propesiya. Wala lang, kasi parang wala namang basis yung tito ko para sabihin na magiging writer ako. Batang-bata pa ako noon. Pero naniwala naman ako sa kanya. Ayan, nakita niya lang na parang...
Well, di ba, maganda yung pagkasulat mo ang Nick Joaquin. Di ba, hindi mo alam kung sino yung Nick Joaquin na yon?
Opo.
Nakita ko yung transition. Anong dahilan? Ba't nawala na? Kasi nung natutuwa mo, Nick Joaquin yung tamang bye-bye, anyari, kumbaga.
Ano po, basta na-encounter ko lang siya na naririnig ko, Nick Joaquin, tapos hindi ko naman inaalam kung ano yung Nick Joaquin na yon. Tapos, syempre nung nag-high school na na-encounter na natin, may writer pala na ganito, pero hindi ko pa nababasa yung mga gawa niya. Tapos nung nag-college na ako, many years later, kasi bumalik na lang ako sa kolehiyo, ayun, dun po sa klase namin ay na-encounter ko yung tawag nito, Woman with Two Navels. Yan po. Tapos,
Yung ba ang dahilan kung ba't malabo yung propesiya?
po, hindi po, yung sabi nung tito ko na magiging writer ako na wala naman siyang strong basis. Siguro naghahanap din po siya ng magiging katulad niya kasi sabi niya may mga anak siya na nagsusulat na magagaling din naman sa language pero hindi mahilig magsulat. So naghahanap siya ng bata na siguro i-groom para maging katulad niya. At ako siguro yung nakita po niya. Ayan po. Ano pa ba? Ayan po yung sinabi po ni Sir Roland po doon sa parang hindi nga po nakikita pa yung medyo intentional po yung paglusaw doon sa siguro may kasama ng rin yung parang para hindi mahalata ganyan. Takot tapos yung rin yung nandun pa rin siya sa prinsipyo ng makita yung collective rather than individual kahit pero nandyan pa rin, nakatago sa ilang mga tula kung nasaan ako doon. Ayan po. Kay Sir Butch, kay Sir Bowman. Ano pa ba? Wala na po ako masyadong, wala na palang mga tanong na kailangang sagutin. Pero yun po, maraming salamat sa inyong pong mga suggestions. Nakita ko po yung sa chat, sabi ay mag-collab ni Jerking. Gusto ko nga lagyan ng mga talaga to, ng mga tawag nito, mga sketch kasi may mga kunwari yung kabiba, parang gusto kong makita ano ba ang itsura ng isang kabiba, ganyan. Ano siya? Tawag nito, improvised na knapsack, ganyan. Nagawa sa sako. Tapos sino daw si Bert? Si Bert ay best friend ko. Wala lang, kailangan ko sa kanyang i-dedicate ito. Kasi pareho kami nang naging journey. Ayan, pero wala na tawag nito, namatay si Bert noong last year sa sakit. Ayan po. Hindi ko na po maiisa-isa, basta maraming salamat po sa lahat ng feedback. Yung mga areas for improvement po, nakanote naman po lahat. At pagkukunutan ko po ng noo yung mga punto. Meron pa po ba? Yan po, maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat po Ms. Maki de la Rosa at Sir Joey sa pagbubukas at sa mga pagpapaalala. Ang huling workshop session ngayong araw ay ang pagpansin sa mga hinahabing kwentong larawan ng manunulat na si Alexandra Alcasid. Magsisilbing gabay sa talakayan ng To Walk a Different Path ang ating workshop panelist na si Ana Felicia Sanchez.
Good morning. So I have a short presentation to guide me. It's really just a bunch of screenshots by way of introducing our featured author for today. So the title of this short introduction is Alex Alcasid, Adventures in Amazon, YA and Story Writing. Next. All right, so 3 parts briefly. I'll talk briefly about her first novel, Dream of Dragons, which was self-published, no? And then a few matters of genre, okay? And there's some keywords there. And then the book project itself, possible questions that we can ask or points to raise. And I mentioned there's stories for self-discovery because if you've read her poetics, that's part of the project. All right, so next, here is a screenshot of Alex's bio on Amazon.com. So I'm gonna read that aloud. Alex Alcasid is a writer from the Philippines specializing in creative writing and fiction. They primarily write short stories in the fantasy, horror, and speculative fiction genres. Some short stories of theirs have been published in the Philippines Graphic Magazine, with a short story, Blue Black, having won an honorable mention at the 2018 Nick Joaquin Literary Awards. Alex also occasionally contributes articles to the opinion column Everyman of the Manila Standard newspaper. Okay, so that's the cover of the book, Dream of Dragons. It's available in Kindle and paperback format. So there's a bit of a summary. Next slide. So if you're curious, yeah, next slide. So just a bit of the characters there. Born the heir to the kingdom of Aldoran, Lauren knew she would have to work hard to fill the place of her kind and noble parents once the time came. So there's a monarchy actually. And then there's going to be a quest, no? And then there's, of course, a love interest named Kay in the end. So we're going to go a bit into the kind of project that this novel was in a little bit. In the next slide, you're going to see some of the reviews. So the thing with Amazon is that people from all over the world will have access to your work. So specific reviews from people located in the United States. They appreciated it. Good first novel, pretty good. What an adventure. I couldn't find the other reviews that I actually saw when I was lightly stalking Alex. Because some of the keywords were beastmen, wolves, no? And with exclamation points. And it's pretty clear that some of the readers were in fact got excited about the world that Alex built in Dream of Dragons. Okay, next. So in the next part, matters of genre, no? It's a bit of historicization to where Alex is now. So in their bio, they wrote fantasy, horror, and speculative fiction genres are their specialty. In the latter, in particular, is an umbrella term originating in Robert Heinlein's essay about science fiction way back in 1947. But the term was locally popularized by Dean Alfar from 2005 onward through contact with editors like Ellen Datlow and the PSF series, and as more Filipino writers began to participate in the global and often lucrative market of online specfic magazines and anthologies. Incidentally, after the category feature fiction was removed from the Palanca Awards. Proponents and editors like Alfar and Kenneth Yu were pushing it hard in the beginning, drawing from their own experiences of projection in creative writing workshops where realism was the dominant mode. Next. So in particular, why some old distinctions have actually existed. Interpretative fiction versus escapist fiction, which is to say literary fiction versus genre fiction. But then, so later on, I think that's part of her poetics, of their poetics, this idea of escapist fiction. But I want to quote, it's kind of anecdotal, but it's supposed to be something that was said in an MFA class, Of course, fiction is escapist. Why else would I read fiction? Said the late national artist Cirilo Bautista, allegedly. Because apparently toward the end, he was really, he wanted to be a fictionist, particularly in Filipino. Some key elements in spec fic: fiction's distance from reality, cognitive estrangement, laying bare a primary set of norms against an alternative set of norms, science fiction's improbable possibilities versus fantasy's plausible impossibilities. Okay. Next. So YA fantasy, which was the first novel that Alex wrote. Usually the genre itself is epic or questing in nature, set in a secondary world with an adolescent protagonist, usually around 12 to 18, but not solely targeted toward this reader age group. So it has nothing to do with the readership. Any age can enjoy a YA fantasy. It has more to do with the age of the main character or MC. So what makes a good YA fantasy? The main character or MC will have a relatable humanity, effective or accessible world building, believability, which entails research of the megatext, integrity of the rules of magic, and so on. It's not patronizing or stereotypical in depicting teenagers, and the romance has substance. So that's related to the LGBT themes in Alex's novel. So hashtag representation matters, and this is really something that has pushed a lot of spec fic online. No, diversity leads to vibrant narratives. Characters from marginalized groups have agency and subvert traditional faiths. For example, dying. No, so in these narratives, the disabled don't die, the LGBT couples don't die, that sort of thing. Next. So we go now to the book project. Some of Alex's stories do fall under speculative fiction. So the three stories here are The Star's Spell, The Pit Digger, and Siren's Song. And I'm quoting something from the poetics in the manuscript. According to Alex, I'd like my work to be snapshots of what it means to be human and what it means to live. And if you notice, this is really an optimism, no, in the act of writing. Something that maybe some of us in our old age, I suppose, are, and especially in these times, are having difficulty wrapping our head around. Next. All right. My Shopee post. Writing a self-discovery. I cite Sir Butch's The Knowing is in the Writing, apart from it personally being like a really handy local manual on fiction, but also very easy, very accessible. Because if the project is writing a self-discovery and knowing oneself, then this is a highly recommended text, I think. The Knowing is in the Writing by Sir Butch. So for example, some of the issues that we might want to raise or consider as we discuss the collection and the book project itself in terms of craft, I would like to mention that these would be in addition to issues already raised in the previous sessions and lectures. For example, whether a speculative element is intrinsic to the work, and the challenges of writing during or so soon after a societal or collective trauma. So in addition to these, here are more things that we can raise. First, maybe the question of pushing a message versus maintaining fiction suspension of disbelief, and avoiding obvious contrivances. Second, raising the stakes, which is kind of a motto from The Noise in the Writing. So if we're talking about to walk a different path as being oneself, being true to oneself, I think it would also mean to leave one's comfort zone and to push oneself into new realities. Second, next slide, sorry. All right. So more issues that we can raise or talk about maybe would be advantages and limitations of self-publishing. So this is a screenshot of Central Books, which printed Alex's local copies, which are available on Shopee as well. Okay, or almost sold out. So it's actually a very easy to navigate website, Central Books in particular. So we can ask Alex, about this. Another issue would be the difference between international and local audiences. So for example, are there certain expectations, trends, preferences? And a lot of our fellows, such as Kapik, for example, might be able really to shed light on questions like this. Next slide. Okay, and then this is a main issue I think that might come up, especially with a young writer in English. And here, allow me to read a little of my reflection about this. So the question of the English language, our use of it, many Filipino writers in English go through an existential crisis precisely because of the language. The audience will almost automatically be either middle-class educated Filipinos or English-speaking non-Filipinos, never the Filipino masses. Then there is the question of content. What makes a story Filipino? And I believe Dean Alfar himself has been asked this question and tried to address it. His own answer is, a story is Filipino. There's no actual definition. A story is a Filipino if you're Filipino and then you write it. But of course, you guys can weigh in on that. I want to mention in particular ICW panelists who have written extensively about the question of language. There is, of course, Sir Jimmy's writing from English and making a native clearing. There's Sir Neil Garcia's anecdote about, I think, NBM Gonzalez, who replied to an American's criticism that Philippine fiction lacked irony by asking if there were anything more ironic than a Filipino writer writing in English. And then Sir Butch Dalisay observed in his One Story at a Time intro to the fiction section of the Likhayan anthology that younger writers of the day ceased asking that question. But with the rise of Philippine speculative fiction and its contact with international markets, it has become relevant to many beginning writers again. When is something an echo of empire, relying on Western tropes and megatext, and when is it cosmopolitan or transnational? And more recently, in their introduction to Critica Cultura's special literary section of the Contemporary Philippine Essay, Bowman Guillermo with Martin Villanueva asked, if Philippine English is so great, why isn't it used in serious writing? So there are, in fact, a number of issues that one can raise when it comes to really the nature of writing in English. Now, in particular, now that we are really being accessible to the global market. Next. All right. So we'll hear more about these issues and other thoughts on craft and the writing process from our featured author, Alex Alcasid.
Hello. Thank you so much, Miss Anna, for that wonderful introduction. I wasn't expecting it. Thank you so much. Good morning, fellows and panelists. Thank you so much for having me at the 60th UP National Writers Workshop. While the sentiments expressed in the earlier video are true, I felt the need to expand on them further. At the time I was tasked to write about my poetics, I admit that I did not give it much thought. I was asked, why do you write? And my first instinct was to answer, why not? The short answer of it is that I want to write for escapism and entertainment, for fun of reading and for fun of writing. Magical worlds and fire-breathing dragons are objectively fun. But the extra time afforded to me by being one of the final fellows of this workshop and what epiphanies came to me from listening to the more experienced fellows explain their work led me to realize that either poetics can change or that they can run far deeper than even the writer realized. I still do want to write for escapism entertainment, don't get me wrong. But I have come to realize that even this fanciful desire may come from a place of pain, from shame, guilt, and envy. I'm aware that my work may be read as simple, possibly even childish, written in a simple language more suited for adult novels than for adult fiction. This is on purpose and is a reflection of myself, and I do believe that writing may be the most vain and selfish thing that I have ever done and currently do. When I was young, I felt I had to grow up quickly to deal with the troubles of my childhood and my family. I had to be responsible right now, right now, right now. I want to write young adult novels due to the desire to recapture the wonder, awe, and excitement that I experienced when I was young and reading fiction books. All feelings that I think I've lost slowly as I grew up, suddenly disappearing. If I manage to capture that feeling in my work and impart that upon others, then that would be a wonderful day indeed. Panelists and fellows, you may have noticed a distinct lack of Filipino theming in my submitted manuscript. Only the short story, The Stars Fell, has anything Filipino about it, and even then, it's not enough. It stems from a reluctance to write about the Filipino experience itself, but that has roots in shame, guilt, and envy. I did not have a typical Filipino childhood, or guess what I thought is a typical Filipino childhood. I never experienced having a home province, of climbing up banana trees, or riding carabaos. I learned about Filipino mythology from reading true Philippine ghost stories books in high school and from research on the internet. Not from kind grandmothers telling me to wear my shirt inside out when going into a jungle in case a tikbalang makes me lost and confused, because there never was a jungle and no kind grandmother. When I was young, I was the recluse, reading books all day and keeping to myself. We spoke English at home, and while my grandmother teased me relentlessly for speaking Filipino badly, in hindsight, she never helped me practice it anyway, so even my classmates would make fun of my accent, thinking I was a foreigner for my bad Filipino. Easy for them to say, it came so effortlessly to them. So shamed into silence for my inadequacy, I leaned further towards speaking, thinking, reading, and writing in English and in English only. I do not write about the Filipino experience because in my heart, I just don't feel Filipino enough. I don't feel the identity that others seem to feel so strongly that it burns into visible patriotic pride. I simply cannot relate no matter how hard I try. When I was 7 years old, I distinctly remember having my first existential crisis. I was riding a tricycle along AP Reyes Avenue and was looking out at the people waiting for jeeps by the McDonald's at PRC Santa Ana. And I thought to myself, why am I me and not someone else? I think having baby's first existential crisis led me towards fiction and the fantasy genre. I didn't want to be me. I wanted to be someone else, someone who led a different life, someone who wasn't this. My childhood attachment to stories about kid heroes saving the world is pretty telling, I suppose. My short story collection, tentatively titled To Walk a Different Path, is a journey for my own self-discovery, to discover who I am and what my place in the world would be my goal, but it's also to explore themes of loneliness. There's so many young adult novels centered around themes of belonging and community, of being accepted among like-minded people. There are houses in Harry Potter, the factions in Divergent, even the camaraderie of people within the districts of the Hunger Games. But where are the stories of misfits who are never enough for one home community? For those who've always feel alone among company, never quite fitting in even though they have enough in common. Too introverted for the extroverted, but too ready to party for the wildflowers. Wildflowers, sorry. Speaking about my short stories for a moment, The Stars Fell was written in a response to a call for manuscripts for speculative fiction. It was actually by Dean Francis Alfar. The prompt was historical revision or historical revisionism, like a what if scenario. I'm not sure if the project ever went anywhere though, so eh. My inspiration for The Pit Digger was actually when I viewed a video that had gone viral early in the pandemic lockdown of last year. In it, workers in full PPE gear were seen digging long trenches on New York's Hart Island. The caption posted with the video was one of typical fear mongering, saying that New York was digging mass graves for coronavirus deaths. I wanted to explore what it might be like being a worker doing this thankless and terrifying task. While Siren Song was actually a sequel to the short story that I had written in 2018, which won an honorable mention at the 2018 Nick Joaquin Literary Awards, Blue Black. Both Blue Black and Siren Song deal with thalassophobia, the fear of the dark ocean and what might hide inside it. I suppose in the end, writing is a journey. For me, it's a journey of self-discovery, while simultaneously being a journey to find my unique literary voice as I learn and experience more of life. From here, I guess we'll have to see where the different path will lead me. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Before we open the floor to comments and questions, so those of you who do have comments and questions, please indicate them in the chat box. So before that, I'd like to ask Alex, how are you today? Uh, it's Friday and we're almost done with the workshop stretch. But how are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm trying very hard to like, because my benchmark for these workshops, it happens every year. Ang goal ko ay hindi maging si Sir Vim. Because Sir Vim from like our first workshop back in 20, kailan nga yan? Oh my God, 2002. Sir Vim yung parang lagi siya naiiyak kapag pinag-uusapan ng pagsusulat. Na? Kaso in recent years, medyo ako na rin yun. So, ang goal ko sana ay hindi ako yun, yung mauuna. Dapat mauna si Sir Vin. Kaso nga lang tapos na sa pag-facilitate si Sir Vin, tapos hindi siya umiyak. Because I particularly like, if I can like begin the round of comments, my favorite line in this extended poetics of yours was really that writing may be the most vain and selfish thing I have ever done. Because it rings very true. No? When the world demands so much of us, it's just like, what do you give up in order to write? No? So yan, may pagaganyan tayong drama. No? So yeah, if there are any questions, concerns that you'd like to raise from our Zoom room, maybe you can start. I know a lot of us, those of us who have read the stories by Alex, will probably have a lot to say. And what I like about the poetics that they presented is that there's an awareness really of how she's based, how they're basically the bunso of this workshop. Now, every year there's really a bunso. For this year, I think it's Alex. So while we're waiting, may comments sa chat box, naubusan na ng luha si Sir Vin. So while we're Waiting. All right, so there's a queue. All right, let's start with Ipay.
Sup? I want to talk because you seem like the kind of person whose initial forays into writing had to do with fandom also. Am I correct? Okay. All right. So I just want to say that I get it. I don't know because I'm also of the generation that actually, and I say this without shame at all in my classes. I'm of the generation that started writing, seriously writing, and cultivating a love for writing after I opened my first fanfic.net account. And I know that the conversation has now evolved from, so I think from fanfiction.net naging ano siya, Tumblr. I don't know if there's anything in between Tumblr and then after Tumblr it was Archive of Our Own. By the way, meron akong account done. So it hasn't really left my life. And I think my point here is to, I think there's always something that's going to hang over your head if you think that your writing journey looks so different from that of other people's. And definitely it may be, but that doesn't make it any less important in your writing process. So I just want to be I would just like to say don't be afraid of where you are now, or just acknowledge it, but it's not something that you it's not something it's something that I hope you don't feel excessive shame or intimidation about, because that doesn't make you any less of a writer from any one of us, really. And I've I don't know if this will apply for you um somewhere down the line, because I know that the pandemic is just going to get worse, maybe at least for the next few years. So it's actually good to have those simple truths, truths that you don't have to argue about like you're in front of a thesis panel for why you write and how you write. If you've got a grasp of those simple truths, and those naman are going to be your foundations for the kind of writing practice that you'll do in the future, the better grasp you have of those simple truths and the less masked they are in your writing, I think the farther that you can go when it's clear to you. Um, when it's clear to you, that's when you can just continue writing the things that you want to write. So I think the truths that particularly hearken to me when I read your stories are that you respond to a lot of readers who are looking for an adventure, who are looking for thrills, who are looking for snappy storytelling with a quick pace. That's what I noticed. The prose seems very action driven, and you're very confident in your pace. If there One of the things that I would ask for if I return to the stories and then I look at them and I look for opportunities to improve in terms of craft. What I would say is I would like to see more of the characters in the story and who they were before you put them into the story. Like say for example, itong sa the pit digger, I like the use of the repetition. Um Particularly intriguing sa akin yung these paragraphs. No one talks about how these people died. We all know, and we're all too scared to speak about it. What if at the mere mention of it we get stricken with it too? We die alone, far from family, who have no choice but to watch through a video call as we lie in a hospital bed, etc. Then it's punctuated by don't think about it. Then later on, this is my favorite paragraph in the story. I don't look like me. I don't look like a man whose job it is to dig holes in the ground. That's this kind of prose that makes me think, ooh, then what? What what character should I form in my head? Imagining who's behind the PPEs. So in the stories, I think I'd love to see a little more personal extrapolation like that. A little puncture into the action drivenness of it all. to, I guess, put some variety into the rhythm and also to take us deeper into the world of your characters, not just what like what how the action is going or what their internal dialogue is like, but also sa siren song naman. Makes me wonder why this character ended up going into the sea also, like their father. Why it was fated for them. So may konting ano, I'm curious about the backstory in the life of the protagonist as well as the father. What makes them particularly sensitive to seeing these creatures and doing more than just imagining them. So there, I'm interested in the little layers of stories behind that, and it's something that I'm sure you'll be able to find when you pursue the stories. I think that's about it for me so far.
All right. Thank you, Pitay. Yeah, if it helps, sorry, syempre I'm thinking of mga tala ng isang super fan ni Sir Vlad Gonzalez also sa UP Press, no? So if you might enjoy that book, especially if the fandoms there are familiar to you, no? And also when it comes to Pitay, observations about character. What I always emphasize, it's because it's something I learned from Rene Villanueva, and I'm just obsessed with it because it's just so it just clarifies things. When you think of character, think of them in terms of dimensions and aspects. Dimensions would be physiological, psychological, sociological. So dun papasok kasi yung mga backstory, no? You flesh out a character, and then you have the aspects, which are the desire for the purposes of the story, the obstacle to that desire, and the eventual destiny. No, does the character get the goal, kumbaga, no? So these will help you with the points that Pitay raised. Next, I think we have Sir Nap.
Hello po, mabilis lang po ito. Nabanggit po kasi yung tungkol sa Filipino-ness, sa parang nagkaka-issue ata siya kasi walang gaanong Filipino-ness dun sa mga akbat. Para po sa akin, wala naman sigurong problema. Baka pwedeng tingnan mo yun bilang pain point mo para pagbula ng kwento o ng akda. Nakakaintindi ka na, no, ng Filipino? Okay. Kasi isa sa mga bagong nababasa ko ngayon tungkol dun sa third culture children. Isang uri din ng mga Filipino na parang hindi sila nabibigyan ng ng focus. Parang pwede mo siyang i-explore tapos ma-fuse mo na lang itong spec fiction. Pero hindi ito pagpupulis. Posibilidad lang na pwede mong subukan. Kasi napakagandang angulo ng mga anak. Yan. Yun na. Third culture kids. Magandang option. Yun lang po.
Salamat sa pagbanggit nun, Sir Nap. Thank you. And then si Ma'am Luna.
Hi, Alex. It's the second time na nagkita tayo, and I won't comment any longer dun sa first two works mo kasi you already know what I said about those two works. Instead, I'll focus on the Siren Song, a work that I love. I love it on two grounds. And sa pagkakasabi ko nito, don't think na pinapatronize kita or I underestimate you. At your age, ang makasulat ng ganitong text na merong imahinasyon, iniisip ang isang mundo na hindi realistiko I think it's an achievement. And may mga detalye dun sa pagkakasulat mo which I think could be cured by some research, not the heavy kind, pero yung para mas maging plausible at mas mabilis yung pacing ng inyong istorya. The detail about the submersible is something that I want to be developed. Parang yung pagkakasulat din nito, in your work, parang in-indicate mo rin suspended na ang mga nationalities eh. And I won't go into the argument of why it is so. Kasi mukhang nakakonekta yon dun sa third children phenomena na sinasabi kanina din na may isa pa akong comment tungkol dun sa third children phenomenon na yon, Alex, if you indulge me into commenting further. Yung siren song, another great thing about it is nakukonect ko siya dun sa ginawa na ni na Jules Verne. Meron siyang texture na matagal ko na rin hinahanap yan sa mga nababasa ko ng mga fantastic fiction. At syempre, ang nakikita kong mga ganitong na-publish, galing talaga sa labas ng bansa. At kung hindi mo naman mamasamain ang aking palagay, talagang makakatulong kung merong bakas ng Pilipinas, hindi naman kinakailangang mula sa patriotiko o yung sinasabi mo kanina, it's because of pride na linalagay mo doon. It's just that baka mas makatulong doon sa pag-harness din ng accessibility of more readers from the Philippines. Kasi pag halimbawa sinabi mo, it's a seaside town, hindi ba doon sa siren song? Ang daming mga seaside towns sa Pilipinas na pwede mo explore ang pag-describe. Magaling ka sa description. Yung klase ng description mo is not yung nagbababad sa lyrical lang eh. May paraan ka na nasasama mo kami dun sa fantastic world. At quite easily nakakapasok kami dun sa world na yun na para bang lumusot kami sa isang wormhole. Doon ko nalaman na talagang meron kang storyteller's gift. Kasi mabilis at saka nasusundan yung track ng isang plot. So, ang gusto ko pang ikomento ay yung sinasabi mo tungkol dun sa shaming sa choice mo na masumulat na lang sa wikang English. And I see this phenomenon even in my own son na hindi naman sa labis na pag-share ay nahihirapan din talaga sa pagbabasa sa Filipino, ikalawa sa pagsulat sa wikang Filipino. At ironic ito, Alex, kasi syempre pinili ng nuno ng batang yon na ipaglaban ng wikang Filipino, tapos nagtuturo ako ng Filipino. Isipin mo yung sakit nun, na dahil din sa kultura, dahil din sa paligid, tapos meron din siyang person with disability kasi siya eh. And I hate the word disability kasi iba siya eh, iba lang siya. At yung choice niya ng wika ay bunsod na rin ng ganoong kondisyon niya. And gusto ko na mabasag yung pag-isolate din nila at pagbubukod din ng mga sumusulat. Ako siguro or ilan sa atin, dapat sinasama natin sila dun sa kinakausap din natin at sinusubukan natin na ma-access din ang ating mga iniisip and vice versa para merong tulay at merong pangunawa dun sa kondisyon na yon. Again, Alex, I think the story Siren Song is an achievement in your journey as a writer. Salamat.
Alright, bago po tayo pumunta kay Miss Mary Ann, basahin ko lang yung ilang follow-up comments ni Kaptik. Kaya yung Kaptik medyo masama pa ang ng ating boses na. Ayan, so syempre, ang hirap mag-scroll up. Ayan, tungkol sa pacing, na sinasabi ni Ma'am Luna, ayon kay Cupcake, baka pwede mo tingnan, Alex, kung saan nagsisimula ang action at doon magsimula tapos mas organically introduce yung background kesa may info dump muna then start ng action. No? So weaving in the details rather than parang isang bagsak na info dump. +1 yung sinabi ni Ma'am Luna, yung sense of place actually, no? Also patok na patok ngayon ng genre na folk horror / folk futurism for e.g. SFNF magazine sa US. And then Sir Butch adds, writing is one way by which we discover our country and people whom we can never know enough. Yeah, and more comment from Cupcake, my cis male white markets din, though like uncanny. Tapos yung term na neurodivergent, no, and neurodivergent daw yung term na when referring to one person lang. Neurodiverse, I think yung pag plural na characters kasi nasa spectrum yung anak ko rin, no. So yeah, now can we have Miss Marianne? Hi, Miss Mary Ann. Are you there, Ayan?
Yeah. Good morning. Congrats, Alex. Kasi I think mataas yung stakes na nilagay mo para sa sarili mo, especially for the siren song. Sabi nga ni Miss Luna, hindi madali gawin yon. And nakita ko yung, nasa sense ko kung ano yung gusto mong goal na to take away from, to create not just a world na nandito, na terra firma, pero talagang an underground world of sirens, evoking yung kay Ulysses na tinatawag talaga sila. May mga ganong sense na, meron ding sense na looking back on the tradition of seafaring stories. May mga ganyan din na trope na Moby Dick, may mga sirens, merong all of those tales of battling the unknown and the darkness. So mataas yung stakes na nilagay mo for yourself. I also like this story the best kasi I think ito yung pinaka may progression yung story. May start, may beginning, may middle, and may end talaga. Although, gusto ko lang sabihin, siguro kasi nag-create ka ng world, meron lang mga lumampas na mga implausibilities. Like for instance, ang seafaring crew kasi, hindi sila madaling matakot. Hindi sila, kahit na may nasugatan na dyan, kahit may namatay na, kahit may kinagatan ng kung anong organismo, hindi sila nagiging catatonic. So, i-check mo na lang yung kung ano yung paano mo ma-address yung implausibility na yon. And then other smaller details, very nitpicking na lang ito. Yung fish impaled, hindi sila tumatagal ng ganyan. Mabilis silang kinakain ng ibang sea organisms. And then yung pag-free dive ng main character, masyadong matagal kasi free diving, parang nasa 4 minutes lang yata yung maximum na world record na scientifically proven na kaya pang i-sustain ng human body. 4 minutes lang yon. Although, baka may mga bago ng findings, so i-check mo na lang. And, so yun. Tapos yung use mo kasi ng point of view na first person, and then, meron kasi mga discussions na about the I being dead. Yung narrator ends up being dead. So, may mga ganong difficulty inherent in that point of view, especially if the narrator ends up being dead. Pero, sabi ko nga, mataas yung stake na nilagay mo for yourself. So, baka part na rin ng choice mo yung to use the first person na mamamatay eventually. So, I also like this story like Ma'am Luna kasi nakita ko na talagang challenge mo yung sarili mo dito. Yun namang sa The Stars Fell, ang pinaka-comment ko lang is yung development ng character, nandun na lang siya sa page 309, first paragraph. Nasa one paragraph lang yung naging transition niya from the first day of school and then at the end of the day, kinausap niya yung lola niya. And then one paragraph lang yung bigla na siyang naging gano'n na nakapag-lead na siya ng mga fellow students na pumunta ng Luneta. Feeling ko na-rush lang yung pag-develop ng character. Pero ang laki ng potential ng ganito, napakalaking potential kasi parang you brought up the matter of yun nga, there's a generation of children na hindi masyadong in tune with Philippine history, na hindi nga nila alam kung anong ibig sabihin ng word na Malaya. So malaki ang opportunity mo to make this story have a character that is more developed. So yun lang. Salamat po. Congrats.
All right. Thank you. So Marianne raised some important points about verisimilitude, no? Kasi even in a made-up world, kumbaga, there would be there would be like an internal logic, no? To that world. So in case merong pagkakaiba against reality, kasi you still want to be believable. So yeah, it is something to check, no? Let's hear from Sir Bowman. Sir Bowman, are you there? Cupcake, sorry, hindi ko makiklik yung Twitter. I cannot see.
Yeah, sorry.
Ma'am Jing, ayan, Sir Bowman na ulit. Okay.
Si Ma'am Jing. Sige, di ako na muna. Sorry, sa may delivery. Alam mo naman. So, ito yung may ilang comments na ako. Particularly dito sa The Stars Fell, tuwan-tuwa ako rito dahil ito ay, yun nga, pinapaliwanag nito yung yung kwento ni Alex kanina tungkol sa kanyang karanasan bilang manunulat, doon sa problema ng kawalan ng Filipino-ness, supposedly. But I think this is a very Filipino piece, itong The Stars Fell, at ito yung mga dilemma, ito yung mga, hindi natin pwedeng malitin ng ganitong karanasan sa lipunang Pilipino. Ang interesting sa kanya ay parang siyang alternate history, merong dito na imbes na Hiroshima ay yung little boy ay bumagsak sa Manila Cathedral. Pero kumbaga this massive event although syempre sinasabi nga Manila was one of the most bombed cities of the Second World War, and we were actually not bombed by enemy forces but by US forces, So parang ganun, Pero this, parang ang instead of conventional bombs, ang ginamit ay nuclear weapon, So ang interesting dito, kahit iba yung nangyari sa kasaysayan after the Second World War, ay yung mga description ng lipunang Pilipino, yung mga politiko at yung pamamalakad ng ating bansa ay wala namang pagbabago o walang ipinagkaiba, So I think that's very ironic, na parang iba talaga yung sa kasaysayan, iba yung landas na tinahak, supposedly independence, supposedly self rule, Pero dito iba yung landas na tinahak, meron pang nuclear weapon. Pero yung kinalabasan is not much different from what we're actually having today, So yun yung parang isang very ironic point, dito sa kwentong ito. Parang we're living as if we were actually a colony, continuing to be a colony, So na sa ganitong klaseng sitwasyon ay halos subversibo, yung gawain ng main character, Pero I agree with Mary Ann na development is something. And there are also other things na siguro sa development ay pwede pang magawa dito sa kwentong ito, yung pagbomba sa Hiroshima, ang daming materials tungkol dito. Tungkol sa epekto nito doon sa buong environment, tungkol sa epekto nito sa radiation, tungkol sa epekto nito sa yung immediate flash na talagang kumita sa buhay ng napakaraming mga tao sa halos millisecond ng kanyang pagsabog, So, ang daming mga descriptive aspects na pwedeng ipasok pa rito tungkol doon sa kung paano, if we are able to imagine this, how an atomic bomb would look like if it exploded over the Manila Cathedral, no? Sadly, ano, kung sumabog, given yung power ng little boy, ano, yung Rizal Monument would also be completely melted, ano? Ganyan, ano? Kasi it's so close. Ganyan, no? So, I think mas maganda kapag tingnan mo yung, I think the physics and the effect of this, kasi it lends depth also, the depth of reality into your narrative, ano? Pagka meron ka pang ganyan. And at yung centrality of this event and how it leads to the present na ganito nga ay maaaring pang mas maitahimo. At ngayon, doon sa first day of college, ano, sa UST, ang tingin ko parang mas fourth year high school yung ganitong klaseng awakening, no? Hindi sa college, no? Sa tingin ko lang, ano, mas pagka may rebellious attitude ka sa high school. Usually these kinds of things, they crop up at that age, ano? Lalo na ngayon na may K-12 na, you know, matatanda na talaga yung pag pumapasok ng kolehiyo. They don't really make fun of each other like they do here in classrooms, no? Like in US, like how you tell the story, ano. So tingin ko lang ay mas mainam na actually para mas maganda sa akin yung dating pagka high school yan, ano, pag-graduate pa lang, tapos suddenly doing this thing, ano. Of course with the necessary build-up of the character na sinabi ni Marianne. So binabati kita. I don't think this totally lacks Filipino-ness. It is a very Filipino situation, ano? Sabi nga ni Luna, it is a very Filipino situation. Kailangan mo lang lalo pang isagad, ano? Sagad yung scenario, sagad yung karanasan, ano? So yun lang naman. Maraming salamat.
Yes. Dagdag ko lang din when it comes kasi to alternate histories, ang sarap mag-geek out on that. Kasi nga you can actually compare how certain cultures and societies reacted, like yung effect ng atomic bomb sa Japan. For example, you see it in the popular culture, yung paglabas ng mga mecha, tsaka lahat ng mga anime nila actually puro yan anti-war, kahit puro war ang narrative, anti-war sila actually, and it's really all a result of that, no? So interesting to see how would our culture react, no? If it were dropped on us instead of theirs in another place. Before I go to Ma'am Jing, shout out. There's a comment from Ma'am Luna, no, from Miss Annette Hug. What a contrast this morning program, how wide the range of literary worlds inside this country is. And then from Twitter, from Cupcake naman, shout out kay Miss Mina Isguera, no, who's a former fellow as well of the UP National Writers Workshop and an advocate of self-publishing. There is typical only to a certain group, and when I read, I want to know what typical is to others. Sometimes we discover that the typical is sad or cool or fascinating or cruel. That's something I actually like getting to. Pushing back against a cruel typical is wonderful to see in Filipino YA. So with that, let's have Ma'am Jing. Ma'am Jing. Sorry. Ma'am Jing, are you there? Ayan. Ay.
Sorry, I forgot about the unmute. Yeah, Alex, I was saying that like Luna, I have read your first two stories, so I'm not going to comment on them anymore. Actually, I'm hoping that my questions will help you to clarify certain issues, no? So first, let me congratulate you on your use of language. You are a wonderful writer in the way that you handle the English language, which is, I think, one of the advantages of the kind of background that you have, no? You have been talking about how it is a disadvantage maybe to a certain extent because you feel a bit unmoored in terms of Philippine culture, but one advantage has been that it has given you this mastery over the language that you have chosen to write in. I think the feeling I get after reading your rereading the first two stories and reading the third one is that your definition of speculative fiction is pretty broad. These three stories are not like each other. So you are experimenting and exploring entirely different areas, no? And as a matter of fact, the fifth, what's that? The story about the two men dating. That one doesn't seem like speculative. The fifth doesn't seem like speculative fiction. No? Something that's quite realist about it. My question is, where do you plan to go from here? I think that's what I am curious about. Are you planning to stay within the realm of speculative fiction? And if so, what type of speculative fiction is interesting to you right now? And then the other question is, do you intend to stay within that comfort zone of not being somewhat alienated from the country in which you now reside? Or do you want to get to know it better and to write literature that is more grounded in the Philippine situation? Because I remember that we asked you in the other workshop who you considered your audience to be, and your answer was that you did not expect it to be in particular a Filipino audience. I'm wondering whether you still feel that way right now. Anyway, assuming that you are going to become, even probably without intending it, going to become more Filipina the longer you stay in the Philippines, I would like to offer to give you a list of possible readings of Filipinas who have done speculative fiction even in the 1940s and 50s, and how different each one was, so that you would get, since you are, as I said, I recognize that you are right now exploring and experimenting. It would be good maybe, or it would be helpful for you to know the work that has been done by these other women. Maybe the members of the panel here would remember Tita La Cambra Ayala wrote a story called Bird. That was, I think, in the 50s. And that's already speculative fiction, an example of speculative fiction. Then there's Hilda Cordero Fernando, who is writing in the 50s and the 60s, who did a lot of experimentations in the genre of the modern fairy tale. I don't know any Filipino women who've been doing horror fiction. So the Sirens is
Ma'am,
is
si
quite...
Yvette Tan po.
Sorry?
Yvette Tan. Yvette Tan.
Yvette Tan, that's right. Oh, there you go. There's Yvette Tan. So there's been a lot of very varied and work being done by women. And if that's where you really plan to stay, then maybe I can help you a little by giving you that list, no, of women that I know. My last comment would be that wherever you decide to write in, whether it be realist fiction or speculative fiction, one of the things you'll have to keep in mind is the need for very believable and authoritative character development, character motivation, because your readers you're inviting them into your world, whatever kind of world it is, and they have to first of all be able to believe in your characters. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
All right. I'd like to add a bit to the list. No, Syempre Ma'am Jing, of course, has her own collections of stories. But there are other names, particularly for horror: Rin Chupeco, Eliza Victoria, Isabel Yap, F.H. Batacan. It's apo. If we're talking particularly about horror, no, but if you want to explore other anthologies by women, yung medyo mas recent, no, kasi Ma'am Jing has the yung mga earlier ones covered, no. So if we're going to add more contemporary ones, so we have Eliza Victoria, Yvette Tan, Rin Chupeco, Isabel Yap. You can also take a look at the stories, not necessarily horror, of Sarah Lumba, Gabby Lee, Daryl Delgado, I think. Marian, do you have spec fic in your collections? Pero yun,
No, mga absurdist
pa.
lang yung mga short
Absurdist.
stories ko. Although, no, meron ako mga drafts, pero hindi ko siya, I don't know how to grapple. Kaya naiintindihan ko nga si Alex eh. Mahirap i-grapple yung spec fic.
Right. There's also
By the way,
Christine
Anna,
Lau, Kate Osias, Nikki Alfar. Yes, Apa.
And I was just
Yes,
going
ma'am.
to, sorry for interrupting. I just remember there's another kind of speculative fiction which is fascinating, and it's comic speculative fiction. The one written, there's a whole book written by Marie V. Sullivan Blanco called Spooky Mo. So sa title pa lang, you can tell that this is going to be funny. And yeah, you're right. You know, the authors that you mentioned, Anna, thank you for reminding me. You know, I actually published an anthology called Tales of Fantasy and Enchantment. And these people that you mentioned are all contributors to that
Andun
book.
din
No?
po
Like
ako.
H. Batacan and
In Mil Flores po, no?
Mil Flores. And then, of course,
Apo.
Eliza Victoria has written quite a number of works. Yun. So it's a rich field, Alec. But you'd be very welcome into it, I'm sure, because you'd bring in a totally different perspective.
Right. And I'd like to add yung kay Isabel Yap na collection published by Small Beer Press, East Hampton. Kasi yun, transnational siya in that the stories aren't like Filipino or based in the Philippines, iba-iba actually. So on the one hand, you do have Philippine folklore. On the other hand, you have Japanese mythology, Chinese mythology. So you're gonna be able to study how Isabel Yap really utilizes the setting and does her research, no, and allows the story to come to life within that chosen place. So since you're exploring, you may want to explore how, you know, they are in fact building their worlds. No? So yeah, makakahanap ka talaga ng space. Yeah. So later you can look at the comments and suggestions in the chat. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment? Ma'am Luna adds that Damiana Eugenio's the collections of folk tales, folk narratives by Damiana Eugenio, it's a good start for folklore and grounding. No? So, you know, there are in fact resources that you can add to that reading list. Masayang mag-research when it comes to these things. Anything else? Severino Reyes, si Maximo Reyes din po yun, no? Yung Creatures of Lower Mythology. The Aswang Project actually, medyo naman siya sa sources niya, no? The epics utilized, no? It's an accessible resource on FB. Yung mga primary sources naman na ginagamit niya are in fact sound, no? If there are no more comments and questions, Maximo Ramos, sorry, not Maximo Reyes. Maximo Ramos. Thank you, Sir Rio. Ma'am Luna, one last.
Since yung sinulat din kasi ni Severino Reyes, meron siyang isang particular story na merong sirena. Ang pamagat niya, ang sirena sa uli-uli. Kung hindi nga lang balakid or obstacle kay Alex ang wika, ang language, magandang binabasa niya ito eh. Kasi ang contribution din naman ni Severino Reyes ay bukod sa nasabi na napaka-Pilipino, iba rin yung layering ng kanyang pagpaksa sa mga sirena dun sa ang sirena ng uli-uli. May concept kasi sa Filipino, Alex, hiwaga, na magandang mapasok mo rin. Meron ka na nun eh. Pero yung konsepto ng hiwaga ay malawak, higit pa dun sa hindi naiintindihan o misteryo. Ito yung nakakabit dun sa pagkilala ng mga syempre yung mga itinatakwil at mga hindi naiintindihan na bahagi ng lipunan. At metaphor lang naman yung mga sirena na ito dun sa hindi pagharap sa kanila bilang mga representation. So perhaps in the future, kung mas okay na dun sa pagbabasa mo ang Filipino, explore these writers kasi mapapalalim nun ang sinusulat mo.
All right. Thank you po, Ma'am Luna. And one last thing from Ma'am Jing before we give the floor back to Alex. Ma'am Jing.
Alex, I just remembered another anthology. It's called Filipino Passion Fruit. Passion Fruit. Filipino women write the erotic. And the reason why I remembered it is that there's a story there by Mylene Paterno, which is about a mermaid, but it's an entirely different take on it. And
Ito po ba yung may papaya sa harap?
oh, may
Is it the one
papaya
with
yun
the-
nga.
Ay, may papaya.
Yung cover may papaya. Anvil Publishing yan. And with this particular story is, kasi I was talking earlier, merong speculative fiction which has comedy. Ito naman, erotic. It is erotic. It's Mylene Paterno's story. I forget the title, but it will come to me in a little bit and I'll tell you what it is. That's it. Thank you, Anna.
Okay. One last po pala si Sir Jimmy, I think. Sir Jimmy, you'd like to say something?
Yeah. It's just a very short comment lang. I just took note of what Luna Sikat said about her son preferring to write I think in English, nahirapan sa Filipino. Speaking from my own experience, I think a number of Filipinos deal in daily life with his own native tongue and with English as well, because that is practically an international language, but not only that, is the medium of instruction in our school system. So that fact, I want to stress it. That fact may even be a distinct advantage if he is sensitive and observant. He might become more familiar with the space between languages, where precisely the struggle for clearer expression of his insights takes place through his language of choice. Whether that is English or Filipino does not matter. You know why? Because there is also a space within a given word where, in the course of the history of that word, its meaning also changes or accrues multiple meanings. The word, multiple meanings. Therefore, it is that space within the word also where you have an internal difference where the meanings are. So that that's why the poet must always reshape the language, forge it anew, work it so as to endow with an apprehensible form a thought or a feeling that the words barely touch or are even beyond the reach of words. That's why words, that's why language is also evocative. Language is label, it's always changing, but language is also conceptual. That's the whole trouble. You have to work the language, you have to reshape it. You have to reshape it. Yeah, that's my own little contribution. well, later on when I am the moderator, I will apologize to the fellows why I am most of the time I am quiet. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. All right. So I guess with that, that's all the time we have. So we'll let Alex have the final word. So, Alex.
Hello. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of your comments. Thank you, fellows and panelists. I wrote 3 pages of notes and I immediately cannot understand anything. Thank you for your questions and comments, especially on Siren Song, because that was actually really, I suppose you could say it's a passion project because I just had an idea for Siren Song after Blue Black, but um, yeah. Anyway, to answer Ma'am Jing's questions about where do I plan to go from here, stay in spec fic and what type of spec fic is interesting right now, I would have to say, yes, ma'am. I think I would stay in spec fic for now at least, because I still do really love fantasy, and I want to achieve like the Mala Tolkien world building. That's one goal. Uh, and would my work be more grounded? I suppose like I really should get to like learning more about my country. I mean, I am Filipino. It is still my country. Like, why am I not like doing more to know about it? So I really should get up on that. I've been sleeping on that for a while. But thank you so much for all of the comments. Also, also the one about the where did it go? Wait, no. Oh no. The physics of nuclear bombs and how it would affect like a city, like it if if the Manila Cathedral was bombed, then also the Rizal Monument would be affected. I did not think of that because I'm very bad with science. So thank you for everybody for reminding me to research a lot more, like a significant amount more. Uh, thank you so much, everyone. I will take these comments to heart and I will use them to improve my writing. So hopefully the next time you see me, my writing will be a lot better. Thank you.
Pasasalamat sa iyong pagkatha ng gunita, Alex. Maraming salamat din po, Ma'am Ana, at sa mga nakasama natin sa ating live workshop sessions. Maghahanda muna ang ating mga workshop fellow para sa kanilang pagtatapos bukas. Kaya naman maagang matatapos ang ating live broadcast. Wala po tayong live session mamayang hapon at magkikita na lamang tayo bukas, Sabado 21 August 2021 para sa huling 2 workshop session at sa graduation ceremonies ng 60th UP National Writers Workshop. Muli, narito ang aming social media pages. Maraming salamat, ibayong ingat at magkita-kita tayo bukas.